All right, we're going to get started here. I'm really excited about this event today. So, we're talking about selling compliant surcharging to QuickBooks merchants. And I'm really excited in a little bit to introduce Garima, president at Biller Genie, and talk a little bit about their feature. But I really want to start this out today by kind of zooming way out and talking a little bit about our industry. I'm going to go through a couple of concepts with you guys today. And then we're going to make it a little bit more specific. I love doing these live events because I am so passionate about helping the ISO agent community find really unique opportunities to grow their portfolio, especially as we see the payment space really transitioning and changing to become much more about integrated payments and about verticalization. And so it's really become a lot more complex. And so certainly there's an opportunity to just walk down the street, walk into merchant locations and sell those locations. I had several consulting sessions with sales teams today that are doing exactly that with success. We're getting a little more creative about the way we're approaching it with content and things like that. But at the end of the day, most agents and ISOs are looking for new approaches, looking for new ways to make these things work and to build profitable portfolios. So I've got four words I want to talk to you about real quick, and then I'm going to introduce Garima. So I want to zoom out and talk about four things, zoom in and talk about how this kind of goes to this particular market segment, and then interview Garima. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is competition. I've been talking a lot more about this lately in our content, but the idea is, who is your competitor, right? Who is your competitor? And as we think about the competitors in the payment space today, I think it's easy to fall into the old trap of saying, well, I'm competing against, Elevon and TSYS and North American Bank Card and Beyond and Heartland and Evo, and everybody else, all the other kind of ISOs, or what I would even call a lot of them, these like legacy organizations that, are using the same model that you're using. And if you've been out in the marketplace, you just know that that's not true, right? That's not who we're competing against today. Who we're competing against today is all of the ISVs, all of the, PayFacs out there. Think about Toast, Stripe. These are the types of companies we're competing with, are these big technology companies that have now integrated payments into what they're doing. You think about the ISV market today and how these ISVs, thousands of them are popping up. Many of them are backed by venture capital or, other investors or other outside money. And they're going after one specific vertical and trying to dominate that vertical. And if you look at any vertical out there, it doesn't matter how small that vertical is, whatever that business type might be, if you go online and search for software for that vertical, you're going to find usually a dozen or more prominent companies that are vying for that one little sliver of the market, that business type, and going after it with integrated payments. And so as we see this in our industry, competition has not only heated up, but competition has also significantly changed, right? Competition has changed. And that's a really, really big issue for us because we have to adjust our approach. So number one word here is competition. Number two is service. So we look at our competitors and we say, okay, what do we have that they don't have, right? What do you have that Square doesn't have? What do you have that Stripe doesn't have? What do you have that Toast doesn't have? And as a general rule, when we look at these technology companies, they're really not presenting a footprint in a local market to provide a high level of service. I had a really interesting Zoom today, a demo that I did actually with somebody, and is a local restaurant, and using one of the big names out there. And I was really blown away by the extent to which that company had not educated this merchant on what the technology could do, right? And when I was able to demo a different point of sale solution, I'm actually making some content around this idea, and so many of you will get to see this video. I recorded it, but as we started to demo what this system could do, he was really blown away by the efficiency and how it works and all the things that it did, when in reality, most of the things that he really liked, probably his current point of sale system would do, I would imagine, but nobody ever took the time to understand his business and help him to apply the technology and the features to his particular situation. That's something that we as ISOs and agents, that's something we can offer that many times our competitors cannot, right? And so we have this idea of service. Next, we have the idea of differential pricing. Now, I don't know how much longer it will be until the Squares and Stripes and Intuits, which we'll talk about in a minute, and these others are going to, really go all in on these ideas of different types of differential pricing, where we have a higher price for certain types of payments, whether that's cash discounting, dual pricing, compliant surcharging. But this is a huge competitive advantage. Again, going back to the conversation I just had a few hours ago with a local restaurant owner, he's going to save about $65,000 a year by implementing compliant dual pricing, in this case, at his restaurant, using some handheld devices for servers. So not only are we showing him how to use these features to his benefit, but we're also implementing differential pricing to dramatically cut his cost of card acceptance. And so this is something that, again, more from a marketing perspective and distribution, these big competitors just haven't really gone all in on that yet, right? So we see how to compete. We see service, we see differential pricing, and then finally, the next thing that we see is technology. Now, I'll be honest with you, it's actually pretty rare these days for the ISO agent community to be able to offer technology that where there's not a huge competitor that has significantly better technology, right? Or at least the same, if not better technology. It's actually pretty rare these days, right? It's no secret that companies like Toast, for instance, have a fantastic technology suite, right? And so what we have to do is we have to go more narrow, and we have to look for these opportunities where we can bring technology to the market, number one, that maybe serves a particular niche a little bit better, right, than other competitors would. But even more importantly, like I already discussed with service, the idea of bringing technology and showing the practicality of how that technology is going to work to solve a very specific problem for a very specific, type of merchant, right? So, technology is a big one. So let's bring these together. We have service, differential pricing, and technology. So what are we talking about today? Okay, well, first of all, let's define the market segment, okay? And obviously, Garima's going to speak to this in a few minutes, but there is this huge market segment out there of card not present merchants who are doing invoicing, okay? I mean, so many of them are using QuickBooks that it's almost not even worth discussing the people who aren't, honestly. Like, there's hardly anybody that doesn't use QuickBooks in this market segment. But these are businesses like, think about home service providers, right? Your HVAC, your electrician, your landscaper, plumber, right? Those types of things. But there's so many other businesses out there that provide all these different services. You've interacted with them before. The company that put up the fence in your yard, the company that you bought the playhouse from for your kids, and they came out and installed that, or, whatever it is. And then there's so many others. Think about, legal professionals and just, SaaS companies, gyms. There's so many of these companies out there where they're sending some type of invoice out to their customers to get payment. So it's a card not present environment. They're using QuickBooks. And so I cannot express to you how huge that market is. It is massive, huge, huge opportunity. And it's one where the ISO agent community has a very, very tiny sliver. They really have not done much, with that one. Okay. So what about these three? What about the competitors? Let's start with that, right? So the competitor here is Intuit. All right. Now, I want to explain something here to make sure you all understand this. So when we talk about QuickBooks, right? QuickBooks is owned by Intuit. All right. And Intuit has QuickBooks, which is a accounting software, right? I don't want to compete with QuickBooks. Okay. I think that would be a very expensive endeavor and probably very futile. It wouldn't work very well because QuickBooks is awesome and everybody uses it, right? But then there's also Intuit also owns this Intuit payment processing, which is integrated into QuickBooks. And when I go into our QuickBooks account on a regular basis, guess what I see? I see a little button that says activate your merchant account, right? They want me to start processing payments with them. Okay. And so as we think about Intuit, right, a couple of things to keep in mind here with them. Number one, they have an overwhelming market share for this particular market. And honestly, without good reason. I mean, the only real reason is their integration with QuickBooks, which I'm going to talk to Garima about here in a minute, where even that really isn't a superior integration. It's actually has a lot of issues with it, but they are integrated with QuickBooks, and that's their kind of only claim to fame that they have. And so, we have Intuit. Now, the other thing we have is we have this idea of service, right? So with this, how can we service people? Well, let me ask you a question. How many of you think that Intuit is giving fantastic customer service, right? It's non-existent. There is no customer service whatsoever, right? It's non-existent. I mean, it's absolutely terrible. And so as we think about this, we think about the service aspect, where we can go out and service these merchants, right? And then we think about differential pricing, Okay. What do these merchants want? Do they need a cash price and a card price? No, right? What they want is they want compliant surcharging. Now, I'm going to get into a little bit more of that with Garima, but I'll give you the 30-second version here. So if I'm processing transactions that are $500 on average for, like, say, an HVAC provider or something like that, well, the issue here that we're going to have is I'm not hardly doing any debit transactions, and I'm doing next to no cash, right? I'm not really doing very much cash. So for me to go to market and say I have a cash price and a card price, it's possible. And Biller Genie actually offers that, but it's not as attractive. It's not as intuitive. No pun intended here going into it, but it's not quite as intuitive because I need to have a cash option or another option. When we do compliant surcharging in a card not present environment where people are clicking a link to pay, it makes really good sense. And they're going, okay, I can pay with my credit card and I'm going to have this fee, or I can pay with a debit card and I'm not going to have a fee. And so while when we think about physical locations, smaller average ticket, the restaurant, the retail store, the auto repair place, dual pricing makes a lot of sense in that environment because we have a lot of cash transactions, but also because in those environments, there's a lot of debit. So if we give them compliant surcharging, many times it doesn't save them very much money because they're running a lot of debit, right? But in a card not present environment, we're not running as much debit, higher average ticket size, a lot more credit cards being used, and we don't really have a viable cash option per se. I mean, of course, you can pay with a check or something, but it just doesn't make as much sense to the merchant. So what we've seen historically is compliant surcharging has taken off. And so I can tell you from multiple consulting relationships over the years, compliant surcharging is the way to go right now with these merchants. They are just much more receptive to compliant surcharging. There are companies that have built huge books of business going after this exact vertical, these verticals with compliant surcharging very successfully. And so I've seen it work. I know it's something that they're very receptive to. So what are we left with? Well, we're left with technology, right? What are we going to do? How are we going to offer them technology? Well, of course, Biller Genie, the sponsor of this particular webinar, they have created processor agnostic, technology that is going to work for these merchants. And so it allows you to put your MID and then have Biller Genie integrate your MID into, the Biller Genie model and the QuickBooks model. So it's your payment processing account. They support just about every gateway out there, but then it integrates together and it offers compliant surcharging. So with that being said, I would love to introduce our special guest tonight, and that is my good friend, Garima.
There you go.
Awesome. Garima, how are you doing today?
Doing well. How about you?
I am doing fantastic. So excited about this event, excited to talk to you about compliant surcharging, as I know you and I have talked about it quite a bit. Talk about what got you started on this and wanting to bring compliant surcharging to the forefront for this segment.
Absolutely. So, obviously, as you know, James, I've been in payments for literally my entire life. And we talked a lot about what the ISOs need and what payment partners are asking for. And compliance surcharging is such a hot topic item across the board for our partners, for our banks that we work with, and ensuring that we had a solution that took all of the onus off of them and was compliant across the board so that they didn't have to worry about fines or worry about anything that Visa or MasterCard might do was really important. So that's really why we made this feature.
I love it. So, I was kind of trying to present how big the opportunity is, right? But you obviously have been involved in it so much longer than I have. What is the addressable market here? Give our audience some concept of just how big this opportunity is in terms of what kind of portfolio they could build.
Yeah, it's huge. So for me, again, like I said, been in payments my whole life, and I always sold retail and restaurant. I thought that was kind of where it was at.
Right.
And as I've started moving into this side of the business, more on the software side, it is such a market that we forget all the time. The CNP market, B2B market, we just forget about it. And if we think about the US has about 32 million SMBs right now, over 55% of them send out invoices. And of that, over 83% use QuickBooks. I mean, it's over like 14 million small businesses that are an addressable market that all send out invoices, that all use QuickBooks, are consistently having this problem of a better way to pay, a better way to collect, a better way to surcharge, and all those other things that come along with it.
Yeah. One of the things I thought about that's so interesting to me, Garima, is when you think about, the retail and restaurant, marketplace, and we look at all the external kind of factors that we have to deal with as payments professionals, whether it be competition from DoorDash, you know what I mean? Competition from all these ISVs, even the idea of like these companies have competition from Amazon. and from other huge competitors.
Right.
AI is going to play a big role in this, right? And so we have all these kind of external components. Then I think about the guy that comes out and fixes my fence. You know, it's going to be a long time before he's worried about AI stealing his job or, you know what I'm saying? This
Yeah, we haven't quite yet been in the world of robots yet.
right? You know what I mean? So it kind of feels to me too like this particular segment of the market is a bit more future proof, would you say, to kind of compare to the other markets that people are going after these days?
Yeah, I would say not only is it future proof, it's less price sensitive. The margin hasn't been compressed over time. There's, they're still looking for alternatives. They're just trying to run their business as a small business, and they're not getting pitched 565 times a day and trying to save them a penny.
Right.
So I think that there's a lot more value that we can also derive for those businesses.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so here's what I thought we'd do. Let's zoom out for 1 second. I want you to really talk about what are some of the other challenges that these businesses face. I don't want this whole event to be compliant surcharging, because that fits into a narrative of the all the different challenges these businesses face with invoicing and everything else. So give our group today, our audience, a little more context of what the challenges are these particular businesses are facing and how you kind of see the surcharging feature as like fitting into that narrative.
So let's talk about your fence guy, right? You mentioned your fence guy. Let's talk about your fence guy. So the fence guy comes out and he's using QuickBooks, and he has to somehow bill you, and you somehow have to pay that bill. So he's using QuickBooks and that's it. And now he builds your fence, and now he's trying to figure out how do I get payment? So he's asking you for Venmo or Zelle or PayPal, or maybe he's going back to his office and he's doing Stripe or Square invoicing, and he's sending you that bill. And so now you've got to pay it. So you're sending him a check, you're calling him with the information, you're going to a hosted payment page, right? It's kind of clunky. And now he has to go back and deposit that check. He has to see how much money he's got, check his Venmo account. So it's just a lot of steps for the fence guy who really just wants to be building fences, right? It's a
Right.
lot of work for him to do all of these little things. He's not trained in accounting. That seems crazy.
Right.
Um, so what we do at Builder Genie is we automate that entire process. So the fence guy can just go out and build fences, right? He goes out and builds a fence. He's using Builder Genie. He says, James owes me 10 grand. James apparently has a really big fence, guys, just so you know.
I actually really do. So go ahead. That's fine.
Hey, James owes me 10 grand for part of his fence. That's all he has to do. And then we take over. Our sync goes back and forth with QuickBooks. We're sending out that invoice. We're taking care of the customer. We're making it easy for that customer to pay. So now James is going on. He's clicking a button. He's making that payment. He's paying with credit card, ACH. He's all done. It makes it easy for him. And the merchant, the fence guy is like, oh my God, I've got my money. We're reconciling in QuickBooks. We're seeing the transaction go through. We're handling all of his receipts and just doing the whole process. So again, the fence guy doesn't have to spend the extra 10, 15 hours a week doing that billing. And when we talk about surcharging, for the most part, these businesses were taking a lot of checks and have been taking a lot of checks. And they are worried about the cost of payment acceptance, frankly, because their average tickets are higher.
Right.
And you got a $10,000 fence. I'm not really looking to spend 3% on taking your credit card for doing that. And I'll just wait another 40 days to get my check, and then I'll go deposit my check. And so having the option for businesses to offset the cost of payment acceptance really allows them to have a more omni-channel approach on how they work with their customers and meeting their customers where they are. And that helps the business get paid faster. We know with interest rates, make money on that money faster, put the money back in their business. There's so much more that they can do with that.
Awesome. Okay, so let's shift gears one more time, and I want to talk about Builder Genie a little more specifically here. So, there's very few people, I think, in the world that understand how complicated it is to create a compliant surcharge that is processor agnostic. I happen to be one of those people since I've worked with different companies that have done it. Explain a little bit to our audience today about what this means. What is compliant surcharging in a processor agnostic, solution? What does that mean? Give them a little context of this new feature, if you would.
Yeah, so that's actually what took us a while to get the feature out, is to ensure that we were processor agnostic and ensure that it was fully compliant. And, that was complicated because right now we're integrated in over 20 different gateways, and we're adding gateways. I think we just finished the cert today of 2 more gateways. So we're adding gateways every month. And so to be compliant on one gateway, also, we know that a lot of our payment partners and professionals out there work with more than one processor and work with more than one gateway. So to have a
Right.
solution here, but not over there, makes it difficult. So what we did is we built our own tool utilizing Visa Mastercard's database to ensure that we're scrubbing for BIN and we're checking on our side to ensure that it's a credit card. We are ensuring that the states that we're allowing it in are the right ones. So we're kind of taking out those 4 excluded states. In Canada, we're capping it at 2.4%. In the United States, we're capping it at 3%. We're giving the pop-ups the right way for the customer and the merchant to be aware of what they're getting into and what kind of situation that they're about to enter into. So that's really where the time on this build came from, is that we wanted to ensure that the customer experience and that the merchant experience, and more importantly, we are a fully partner driven organization. So the partner experience should feel the same regardless of what processor and or gateway they may be using.
Got it. Awesome. Okay, let's see. I got a couple of questions before we go to Q&A here. Talk about customer experience. So it's always a concern. We're talking about surcharging. It's really funny. I actually have had several. You mentioned the fence. So ironically, I actually paid money to have a fence put up, and which is one of the reasons I brought that up. But recently we got a big like a playhouse thing for I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and so we want to get an outside, I don't know what you call them, but big playhouse. And they come and install this thing. And when we went to buy it, I was like an hour away from my house at the place that had them. And so, they print out their invoice and I'm like, well, it was like, I'm like, how do I pay this? And they're like, well, you can just, write us a check. And I'm like, I don't have a check, and they're like, well, you have to pay for it to get the date, and it was like a month away. And then, you know what I mean? They get way out. And so what did I do? Well, they told me that they would just charge me a little extra if I paid with my card. I whipped out my card. I paid for it. I was done with it. I didn't want the hassle. I just wanted to be over with. So, I think customers are definitely, that behavior is being programmed now, where we're a little bit more like we understand, hey, I'm going to use my credit card right now. That's going to cost this merchant. But how did you approach the customer experience? I know I'm sure that was really heavy on your mind when you built out this surcharging feature, and how does that really work for the end user that's actually paying this invoice?
So I think that at the end of the day, surcharging and all of that and having a good customer experience is all about customer options. And it's about putting the power in the customer's hands to make the decision on what is the easiest and most consumer friendly way to pay. Like I always talk about Amazon and say that like Amazon is the reason why I have 50 packages outside my house every single day. It's because, I mean, it's not because I shop. No, it's because of Amazon.
Yeah, it's
Because
their fault.
right, it's their fault because I think of something, and the moment I think of it, before I can even process that, do I actually need it? I've already pressed the button on Amazon and somehow it shows up in 2 days. And they've made that customer experience so easy for me that it takes any pain out of the buying process. And I think that customer experience needs to be that way across every single channel that consumers are. So me as a consumer, whether I'm paying my lawyer, whether I'm paying my fence guy, whether I'm paying Amazon, I need to have that choice to make it easy for me. And maybe what's easy for me is to write a check. Maybe what's easy for me is to use ACH. But in
Right.
most cases, like you, what's easiest for me is to use a credit card. And I want all those points, right? And I'm okay with someone taking 3% because I
Right.
really do want those points. So for our customer experience was very important that we gave that option to the customer. So we said things like, as soon as the customer sees that invoice and it says it's $100 for a fence, if they pay by card, it says an additional 3% may be added, or whatever percentage you decide to put in there for surcharging. An additional 3% may be added if this is a credit card. As I put in my card number, as we bin scrub it, if that is a credit card, it'll say, hey, FYI, this card is going to be charged for $103 like it was a credit card. Would you like to go back or would you like to continue? So again, as a customer, it gives me that option to say, I'm totally okay with the 3% or absolutely not. I'd rather pay with another payment method. Maybe it's a debit card, maybe it's ACH, maybe I'm going to write this guy a check, but at least it gives that customer that option. And as you said, I think as consumers, we're becoming more understanding of the fact that surcharging is just the way that it is. It's the cost of doing business.
I love it. Okay, so we have to try something real quick here because I've been dying. I like to ask questions when we're going through this for the audience, but our chat was disabled. My IT guys in here give me a thumbs up that it's working now. So I would love to see, and you guys can try this out in the chat. If you're listening right now and you have sold a surcharge merchant, so you've sold a merchant on compliant surcharging, it doesn't matter if it's card, card present, card not present. Do me a favor and in the chat, give me the number of merchants that you've sold on compliant surcharging. So if it's 0, put a 0 in there. If it's 1, put a 1. If I don't see anything in here, I'll know my chat is still not quite working. And it looks like it is not. Okay, so let's do it. Yeah, let's do a raise of hands real quick. So if you have sold at least one compliant surcharging merchant, raise your hand. Okay, you got to do a little hand raise over there. I'm just curious to see how many we've got here. So hold on. Okay, got 16. Okay, good. So the vast majority of our attendees have never sold a compliant surcharge merchant before. Okay. All right. So now let me ask you one other question, and then I'll get to this next one with Garima to kind of set this up. So next question, so you can put your hand down if you're a no to this next one. Next question is, how many of you have sold a merchant on some type of dual pricing? So, or differential pricing. Could be dual pricing, cash discounting, non-cash adjustment, service fee, whatever you want to call it. You've sold a merchant on something like that. Could have been surcharging as well, just like any of the above. How many of you have sold somebody on that? So, okay, interesting. Okay, so pretty close to the same number. I'm actually really surprised by that, Garima. That's pretty cool. I actually thought we'd have a lot more that had done the other than had done compliance surcharging. That's really interesting. So that goes to show compliance surcharging is gaining some momentum, that is starting to catch up. That's really cool. So this brings me to my next question, Garima. So when we think about compliance, and I know neither of us are attorneys, so this is not legal advice, this is not professional advice, this is Garima and I just sharing our opinions. But what do they need to understand about compliance, as far as what does Biller Genie actually do? What's the scope of what you're taking care of versus what do they still need to be talking to their ISO and their processor about to make sure that they're doing the right thing for the merchant?
Yeah. And again, I love the disclaimer, definitely not an attorney. So anything I say can be used against me. But I would say that ensuring that they have told their processing partner that they are surcharging is important. Now, the card brands have removed the requirement of the 30-day notification period back in April, but they do have to notify their processor that they are planning on surcharging or that they are surcharging. Outside of that, everything else is handled by Biller Genie. So we are handling the compliance in terms of the bin scrubbing. We're handling the compliance in terms of the geolocation, so where someone is located and what states they're allowed to. We're putting a cap on the amount of surcharge being allowed, so you can't surcharge more than 3%, and we are capping that within the system. And there's kind of a couple other things in there that are all around compliance surcharging, around the pop-ups and how they show up and that the customer is aware. But we are taking care of all of that on our end to ensure that our partners are always in that realm of compliance and not having to worry about card brands coming after them for doing something that may not be considered the most kosher.
Got it. Love it. Awesome. Okay, so I've got one last question. Before I get to that, I just want to let everybody know what we're going to do here in a minute. We're going to do something, Garima, that I have never done on a live event before, so this will be really fun. I'm going to ask them, don't do it yet, but if you have a question, I'm actually going to have them raise their hand and unmute them, and we're going to let them ask their question. So, no filter. We won't have any filter on questions today. So Garima and I, we're both just going to be in the hot seat today. So, and I'll ask the last question here to Garima, and then if you want to be thinking about any questions that you might have for her. One of the issues that I was thinking about when I was thinking about this event, Garima, is that I think our audience may not be as familiar with some of the challenges in building a card not present portfolio versus card present. And what I mean by that is, with card present, you're never really concerned about volume. And what I mean by that is, if I sell a merchant doing $50,000 a month in volume, there's really nothing I'm going to do to get them to be doing $200,000 a month. They do 50,000 a month. That's what they do. Now they may open another location or they may grow, but that's nothing I can do about that. Right. Whereas in a card not present world, talk a little bit about this issue where merchants a lot of times even maybe discourage card acceptance. And do you see surcharging playing a role in maybe even increasing volumes in this particular segment of the market?
I love that question. That's a great question. I was actually just talking to one of our large partners about this last week, that we have seen categorically approximately a 3x same store year over year growth with our merchants because they're in the card not present space. And so for many of them, they either weren't taking cards before and they weren't taking electronic transactions, or they were and it wasn't easy. So if you think about the way that you pay in a card not present situation, kind of what I talked about before, whether that's Venmo, Zelle, one of these other peer-to-peer payment methods, or you're writing a check, or you're going to a hosted payment page and it's kind of not secure and you're entering your card details, or you're calling someone, they're keying it into their virtual terminal. those are all very difficult on the consumer. So
Right.
as a consumer, I'm not making the easiest choice for payments. I'm just saying, well, how do you take a payment? Let me make it. So we see a lot of these merchants and we ask them things like, how much revenue do you do? We don't usually say how much do you do in merchant services. We say how much revenue do you do?
Right.
And they'll say 2, 3, 4, 500,000 a month. And then we'll talk to their payment provider and they're like, oh no, they do 20. And we've had customer after customer, merchant after merchant that has gone from, like, in fact, the customer I'm talking about is a pool company. I was talking to one of our very large partners. I happened to pull it up, and they had done about $60,000 in monthly revenue, monthly processing, kind of
Right.
every single month. They turned on Biller Genie in September, and in the month of September, they did $280,000 in processing. The merchant's business
Wow.
didn't change. It's not like they all of a sudden started servicing more pools. It's just that all of those people who were paying them via check and other payment methods all of a sudden we're like, wow, this is so much easier. I've got this on my phone. Let me just click a button and make a payment. Let me just enter
Right.
my card details. This is so much easier. I don't care about, what I pay. And then also from a merchant perspective, if they can offset that card acceptance, then they're not as wary about allowing their customers to pay in that method. So for the merchant, what we talk to merchants about is they get paid on average about 47, 50 days faster than they would get paid otherwise. So they get paid faster, money in the bank faster, and it just makes it a better experience for their customer. They have things like auto pay and everything else on. So it makes it easier. And now they're offsetting any potential cost that they could have for payment acceptance.
Mm.
And it just streamlines their process without costing them a bunch of time and money.
I love it. Very good. Yeah, I think that's one of those really important things because I think surcharging is an interesting add-on for you guys because it kind of fits into that whole narrative, right? It's like you're already doing all these things that make card volume increase. Well, now with compliant surcharging for those merchants that have been even discouraging it and saying, well, we don't want to take cards because we don't want to pay that 3% for those credit cards. Now with compliant surcharging, these agents and ISOs can work with those merchants and say, well, hold on a second. Let's do compliant surcharging. If people really want to pay with a card, why would you stop them? It's not going to cost you anything anyway, unless they're
Right.
doing debit and then the cost is going to be minimal. So, why would you stop that? So, okay, here we go, everybody. We're going to give this a shot. So if you have a question for Garima, just raise your hand and I will unmute you and we'll just see how it goes, right? So, all right, let's see here. So we're gonna go Tom Gallagher. We're gonna go with you first here. So Tom, there you go. Tom, what's your question?
Question regarding interchange on card not present. What is the average rate? I've got a merchant of mine that is on Interchange Plus, and I've seen rates of 3% come through for card not present charges.
Garima, do you want to have? I mean, I could give it a go.
I'll let you take
Okay.
that one.
So I'll talk as the CEO of ISOAMP right now. So we see tens of thousands of statements, and what I will tell you is there are some really big variables that impact the average effective rate of interchange. But generally speaking, card not present 2.2%. Is what we've seen as kind of our average, but there's a lot of variance there, mainly because of, as Grima brought up a little bit ago, B2B. That's a big one. And again, B2B, is it optimized or is it not optimized? Well, that's that's 2.95% versus at 1.9 potentially on level 3. So that's a really big one. And the other big differentiator obviously is going to be debit. How much debit do they do? Is it regulated or not? Unregulated debit is actually getting really expensive. It is insane how much that's gone up. That's a whole other topic. So yeah, but anyway, 2.2%, Tom, would be a rough estimate that I would give you.
And just one thing to add to that is we do automatically do level 2 and level 3 interchange optimization. So for those customers who are card not present and in B2B space where you're seeing some of those interchange rates be a lot higher because they're not optimized right now, Biller Genie does automatically optimize those and pass that feed into the gateway to ensure that the merchant gets the best pricing for interchange.
Tom, you got any follow-up to that?
Yeah, just one question on the debit card side of things.
Sure.
How are you setting up that pricing?
Well, I mean, that's up to you, right? So, I mean, Grima, you could speak to that, I guess. But as far as, I guess he's asking the role of, Biller Genie versus them as far as pricing.
Yeah, so we're not involved in how you set up the merchant's pricing, right? You're the processor, you're the ISO, you're handling the merchant, they're your customer. So you set up that pricing however you feel most comfortable with for your merchant, whether that's interchange pass-through, tiered, whatever, flat rate, whatever you'd like to do. And then on the Biller Genie side, in the surcharge section, you're just putting in what percentage you'd like the surcharge to be every time that card comes in for a credit transaction.
Yeah, I think one of the really important things to understand, I even did a little bit of a training video for Biller Genie on this that you'll be able to check out when you're a Biller Genie partner. But, it's really important to understand Biller Genie is handling the surcharging, right? So they're handling collecting additional revenue on certain transactions, but they're not handling pricing. So as an example, I mean, I know people all the time that'll do like a rate share. So they'll even do, well, our merchant only wants to do a 2% surcharge, and then they want to pay the extra 1%. Like, that's fine. Like, Biller Genie is just there to help that merchant collect extra revenue on certain card types. What you do on the pricing, that's up to you as the ISOR agent. So, okay, let's go to Neil. Let's see if I can get it to, oh, hold on. There we go. Neil, you have to unmute yourself there, but there we go. What do you got?
Hey there, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Hey, I was just curious about the geolocating feature that you mentioned. Can you explain how that works? Is that based on the card being used and the address linked to that card, or maybe the address on the invoice? I'm just curious about that feature.
Yeah, it's actually the merchant's location address. This has been a very strange gray area across the board from the card brands, because what they're really trying to prevent is those merchants that are in those states that are paying taxes in those states, that are really registered as their businesses in those states. Those merchants are not allowed to have surcharging. This is especially interesting kind of in the tri-county, like the tri-state area, when you talk about Connecticut, New Jersey, maybe you're a fence guy in New York and you're cutting lawn over in Jersey or in Maine or Connecticut, like places that are not allowed. So it's really based on the merchant's location, and if the merchant's location on the information that we get shows that they're in one of the 4 states that are restricted, surcharging feature will not be allowed to be turned on for that merchant.
Got it. That makes sense. Let's go to Michelle. Michelle, you'll have to unmute yourself. There you go. Michelle, what do you got?
Can we see what the workflow looks like? Do you guys have that on a slide or live that you can show?
We don't have it on a slide for this event, but I actually just finished shooting a bunch of videos for Biller Genie, and we have it all right. Actually, Greenman, can you talk about that? So let's say somebody on here is like, hey, I really want to do this. Before people jump off as we're going into the FAQs and all that, where do they need to go to learn more? And then talk about how they would get access to the training and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's so James has created some amazing training for us. There's videos, there's all kinds of things. There's workflows, there's screenshots, there's everything you need. So we have a full certification and training course. If you go to partners.billergenie.com, again, that's partners.billergenie.com. If you go to that site, you'll find everything. You'll find merchant facing demos, you'll find training information, you'll find our certification course that James has created that'll have these surcharging videos in it as well. You'll find email templates as well as frequently asked questions. And everywhere on that page, you'll see that you can email us directly at partners@billergenie.com. We have a team of people that sees those emails all day, every day. Within a 2-hour SLA, they will respond to you and get you your answer.
Love it. Let me send this out. I just sent this out in the chat to everybody. So yeah, that's partners.billergenie.com. And so to clarify that, Grimo, what you're saying is they can go there right now, sign up, and start watching training, even if they're not signed up as a Biller Genie partner yet.
Exactly. And also every Thursday at 1:00, we do a full training for our partners. So if you'd ever like to learn more, you're welcome to get on those.
Beautiful. All right. We'll take 2 or 3 more here. Let's get Chuck. So Chuck, it's all you, sir. There you go. What question you got for us today, Chuck?
Hey, forgive me if this has already been addressed, but how does Biller Genie handle the occasional card present transaction or manually keyed in transaction?
So we have 2 options there. So actually, that's a little bit more of a complicated question. I'm going to answer that as simply as possible. So first of all, we do connect to a USB swiper if necessary. So if necessary, someone can plug a USB swiper in, they can take a card present transaction. If you have a consumer that is in your business, we do also have a full virtual terminal that's built within our system where someone could key in that card number. We also do on time payments. So let's say it's not an invoice and you want to take a payment. So think HVAC, right? They're doing a whole bunch of work. They're doing AC work for you, but now you're also going to walk in and buy an AC filter, and they don't want to have multiple systems. So we do have a way to take that payment right on site and also have that reconciled back into QuickBooks.
Yeah. And I think, Rima, one of the other important things about this for people to understand is, let's say I'm working with an HVAC company and right now they're using Verifone wireless terminal, right? With GPRS or something. What's interesting to understand is it's not like that's the ideal solution. So, for most customers, like for me, if I have a contractor coming to my home, the last thing I really want is the awkwardness of them like getting this terminal and coming up to me and like here, like the way that this should work is that they send you the invoice. And what's cool about Biller Genie is that they make it really easy to do that instantly and from your phone. And so they can just send that invoice out, and then I could just get that on my phone, click on the email and pay it. And I can pay it very quickly and easily. And so that's kind of, I think we would agree that that's basically the future, right? In other words, people are I think the era of the wireless terminal and all that, I think that's going away because it's just so easy on the phone. And so I would imagine that that'll be a trend. In fact, what's funny, Green, I'm just realizing, we didn't really talk about it all yet. I see some of you still got your hand raised, but you're going to find this interesting. Talk for just a second about the QuickBooks integration. We really didn't talk about that at all. So talk about how it integrates with QuickBooks and specifically with surcharging. What does that mean in a QuickBooks environment?
Yeah. So we didn't. That's interesting. You're right. So we're integrated with all versions of QuickBooks, QuickBooks Desktop, QuickBooks Online, Enterprise, Accountant. I mean, literally any version of QuickBooks out there except for QuickBooks POS, because as we've said across the board on this call, we are a CNP solution. We're not a point of sale solution. And we also connect with other accounting software, but QuickBooks is very much the elephant in the room. And with surcharging, when we take a surcharge, so today, if you're just doing surcharging the normal way through a gateway, you have $100 transaction, you run it for 103, that $3 isn't accounted for anywhere. It's just additional revenue or additional expense, and it's not accounted for anywhere, right? It's not in the 10Ks, it's not in anything. So what we do is we actually create a new chart of accounts. We create a revenue item that says the tech fees. We show exactly how much the person has made so that they can do a quick journal entry at the end of the month for how much they were charged for merchant services, offset against how much revenue they made from the technology fees. So therefore, it is fully GAAP compliant in the way that we handle surcharging.
Good stuff. Yeah. And I think one of the other interesting things, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm not an accountant, but I believe one of the cool things about this is that when that merchant actually goes in and runs their profit and loss report, they're going to see that revenue line item in there. Is that right?
Yes. They'll see that revenue line item, and if they've done it well, or if we've done it well, we're going to ensure that the expense that they have in merchant services will also be offset by that.
Right, exactly. Right. So but it's a cool thing because when you're doing these things, one of the problems a lot of times is that the merchant, especially with compliant surcharging, it's not always easy to connect the dots on a merchant statement between revenue collected from surcharging and the fees that are being offset. But when you give it to them in this way, then when they go into QuickBooks, they can see, oh, here's how much I made on surcharging revenue. And they're also going to have that line item for merchant services fees, and they'll be able to see how those offset and what they've saved on that. So, okay, let's do two more questions. Jerry, we'll get you going here. Jerry, go ahead and ask your question, sir, if you got one.
Yes, sir. Thanks. Two questions real quick. Number one, as an ISO, what's our fee structure if we use your service? Number two, you may be aware of a company by the name of ExpressPay. Could you explain how you guys differentiate from ExpressPay with your service?
So I'll start with the second question first. I don't know ExpressPay. And to make it simple, there's a lot of companies out there that do various pieces of what we do. And so I don't know the ins and outs. I can tell you everything about what Biller Genie does, and I'm sure that we can find what the differences are and what markets we service. We are very specifically an accounts receivable automation system. We do full invoice infrastructure from the beginning to the end, and we ensure that merchants get paid faster with whatever processor and gateway that you're using. In terms of our fee structure, we bill the merchant directly. We bill $24.95 to the merchant. That's how much we bill the merchant every single month. There's no startup fee and there's no long-term contract. And then we do a rev share with our partners.
Cool. And to clarify then, there's $24.95 per month billed to the merchant directly from Biller Genie. There's a rev share to partners, but there is no revenue sharing on payment processing because you don't do the payment processing. So whatever deal the ISO agent has with their upstream partner in terms of how much residual they're going to make off the margin on the merchant services, Biller Genie is not taking a piece of that. Is that correct?
Correct. Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, last question. Let's go to Gardner. Gardner, give us our last question here.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask, I've done these integrations before with other integrated partners, and I was going to ask how do you get over, and I'm sure the answer to this is just kind of ease of use and showing the demos in the system, but two parts of it. One of the biggest friction points is cards that are on file, and getting an integrated file for those cards so the client isn't rekeying those that they're currently using. And the second part to that is no matter how much like cash flow and savings you show, sometimes there's a financial point of contact involved that views this as managing two systems or uses the term double keying or those things that maybe weren't involved in the decision. I was just wondering, if you run into that objection on the implementation of the cards on file, and then somebody looking at this as, how does the technology reduce the friction of using two systems based on their words and perception?
So again, start with the second question first. But the biggest thing about Biller Genie, one of the most important things that we do, like by far, is that we don't make people change their current process. I've sold merchant services my entire career. I've tried to change people's POS systems. I've also, just like you, sold a million different QuickBooks plugins that do all kinds of things, but never do what they're supposed to. So I understand and feel your pain. And so one of the things that's really important about Biller Genie is that the merchant does not need to ever log into Biller Genie. They do everything that they normally do in QuickBooks. We have a bi-directional sync, and we take all that information, we push it back and forth without the merchant ever having to log into our system, other than that very first time where our team is training them. That makes it a lot easier for that merchant. So that CFO, that bookkeeper, that accountant who says, oh my God, I don't want to do manual keying, I don't want to do double entry. That is like one of the core principles of our business, is that we ensure that they're never having to rekey information. They're putting into QuickBooks. That is their source of truth. That is their database of record. We're pulling it out. We're getting the invoices out and paid, collected, and reconciled. And then in terms of your first question, in terms of cards on file, two answers here. The first is for cards on file. This is customer-driven payments, not merchant-driven payments. So when you think about a traditional QuickBooks plugin, you think about a virtual terminal that's built into QuickBooks, and all of those cards are saved on the merchant side because they're keying those cards in. That is not our solution. Our solution is we send out that invoice to James. James, as the customer, puts in his card information. It is saved on James's side as well as on our side. So the onus of getting the new cards is on the consumer, not on the merchant. Now, obviously, there's still merchants who have hundreds of thousands of customers that are on auto pay and on some kind of, they do have saved cards. So in the next month, you'll hear us introducing a very cool feature that allows them to import that card data on some major gateways. But today, we don't have a solution for that. Give us a couple weeks.
Cool. Yeah, that'll be pretty sweet. And the other thing too is, the truth is there's actually a lot of friction. Most merchants are already doing a lot of entry because they're making a PDF invoice and sending it out, right? So there's a big part of that. We have one other. I do want to get one more really quick. So rapid fire here, Michelle. Let's give us a quick question here to close us out. 'Cause I saw you had your hand raised as well. Let's see if we can get Michelle. Unless you might have already gotten it in a little bit earlier.
Oh, here, I did. That was from before, but I'll ask another one.
Okay, go ahead. Give us a quick one.
So you talked a lot about ISVs. Kids are coming home, so now you get the dog. What do you do about integration with this QuickBooks Biller Genie and ISVs?
Oh, good question. Let's end with that one. What do you think about the ISV market, and what are your plans there?
So the ISV market is awesome for us. Because so many ISVs are connected directly into QuickBooks, and we do daisy chain integrations all the time where the information goes into QuickBooks from that ISV and we pull it out and we send it out. So ISVs are great. I would say that our team at Partners, so if you email us at partners@billergenie.com, our team is happy to get on the phone. Our team is happy to scope the opportunity with you and see if there's something we can do there. But for the most part, we work with quite a few ISVs because they all have kind of integrations for like inventory management, route management, something like that. And that goes into QuickBooks for their general ledger and accounting. We pull that out and handle their accounts receivable and billing.
Awesome. Love it. So Garima, thank you so much for your time today. Real quick, let's give out this info again one more time. So it's partners.billergenie.com. You can go there and start your journey there by just doing a self sign up. You don't have to be a Biller Genie partner or anything like that, but you can go in there and start your journey there. And then also, I believe you said it was partners@billergenie.com. Is that right? Is the email address?
Yeah.
Awesome. Anywhere else you want to send them to learn more about you or about the company?
No, just if you go to our partners.billergenie.com site, you'll find our email address. You'll find all of our content. You'll find James a million times telling you all about all that we do with a lot of training material. So, it's definitely the place to be. You'll also find information on any of our live events, any of our webinars, any trainings that we have, new information. So definitely where you should go. And if you ever need anything, please, please, please find us. Email us at partners@billergenie.com. We will definitely respond very quickly.
Awesome. Garima, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share insights with our audience today. I really appreciated it and wishing you great success with this new feature.
Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it.